All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm moderator Lori Cole. Note, all the attendees' phones have been muted, so everyone should be able to hear our awesome speaker, Lisa. At the end of this session, we'll be taking questions, and you'll notice a chat window on the right-hand side of your WebEx screen. At entering the webinar, you can type your question into that chat window, and we will do our very best to answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of the webinar. So many of you have signed up for this webinar. Our mission is to make your job search as easy as possible. We have 6 industry-specific communities ranging from accounting to veterinary. And as a job seeker, we save you time by collecting postings from more than 12,000 internet sources. And then we deliver only the jobs to you that match your unique preferences. We have free basic membership as well as a premium membership, and includes full access to our jobs database and our unique iScore Resume Optimizer tool. It's such a cool tool, you need to check it out. It will really help you with your job search. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa Shuster. She joined iHire over 3 years ago, and she manages our HR function from our Washington, D.C. metro office. Experience at companies in a number of sectors, including technology, business services, nonprofit, and government contracting. And Lisa's seen the transformation of the employment space over her career and continues to keep a pulse on the latest trends and practices, and she interviewed quite a few people as well. With that, I will now turn it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Lori. Can you hear me all right? All right, well, I'm thrilled to be here and speaking with you today. I present on this topic many times a year, and I love it because it's so relevant to so many people. Anyone who wants a job has to go through this process. And interestingly, there has been so much disruption to the recruitment space in the last decade, or really even the last several years. And it's funny because with all of that disruption, the interview really hasn't changed very much. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but the thing about that is hopefully a lot of what we're talking about today won't be all that new, and hopefully it will be a validation of what you already know, a reminder as you delve your next career opportunity. So let's get started. So today we're going to talk about the art of interviewing. We'll talk a bit about preparation because that really is going to be the key to your success through this process. We'll talk about the bread and butter, the interview itself. We'll talk about some interview questions that you can, if you can prepare in advance for, you'll have, you're halfway there. We'll talk a little bit about salary and negotiating. We'll talk about those things that you shouldn't be doing in preparation or during the interview. And then I'd like to allow at least 15 minutes, if possible, for Q&A. I often find that that's an invaluable part of this workshop. The interviewing. I have to tell you, I have never heard a person say, I really like interviewing. It's one of those things that you simply must do if you would like a job. And if you say that you're nervous about interviewing, that's natural, that's normal. It's almost like public speaking. And that nervousness isn't a bad thing. In fact, it will even boost your energy level, and that's a good thing. It is important to remember, however, that interviewing is a learned skill. You don't learn how to ride a bicycle without practice. And I would say it's the same with interviewing. And so preparation is very important, and just the fact that you're attending this webinar, that's half the battle, and we'll talk about very specific ways that you can prepare. When we're talking about preparing for the interviewing, a very key thing that you should be doing is researching the company. And I don't mean getting a passing knowledge of what the company does. In this day and age, with the internet at our fingertips, there's a lot of ways that you can research the company. And so you can find you can find out about the industry. You can research some specific challenges that the industry is facing. It's not that uncommon when you're interviewing for an interviewer to say, tell me, what do you know about this company? And so if you've done your research, you'll be in a good position to answer that question. You want to rehearse your answers to commonly asked questions and have specific scenarios prepared. And if there's one thing that you take away from this seminar tonight, it would be that you prepare, I would say, 4 to 5 examples of specific projects, specific work examples, and the role that you played in them. The role you played in the design of the project, the development, in the challenges, the failures that happened, the way that you communicated with your team members on these various projects. And you can have those 5 scenarios kind of tucked in the back of your head. You'll be able to answer questions when you're specific questions that you're asked about. Now, at least 2 hours for the interview. It's hard to predict how long the employer will keep you, but oftentimes they want to give you a tour of their facility. You may be meeting with more than one person. Sometimes assessments are involved, although typically you may know that before the recruiter will share that information with you. But you don't want to seem as though you have more important things to do, so you just want to allow plenty of time. Dress as though you're ready and enthusiastic to go to work. And so, this is a question that I always get. How do you know how to dress for an interview? If you're going to interview for a CPA position or an attorney position, sure, those are more conservative industries, and likely you'll want to wear a suit. But if you're interviewing for a developer in Silicon Valley, that's a much more casual type of environment. So a few ways that you can figure out how you should dress. If you know someone that works for the company, that person, do some research. These days, companies have a lot of pictures on their social media or on their company webpage, and you can see what they're wearing. Another option is to simply ask the recruiter. And a good rule of thumb is to dress just a little bit nicer than the work environment would dictate. And basically, I would say for men, khakis and a button-down should be sufficient. And for ladies, nice slacks and a blouse should be sufficient if you have questions and you just can't find those answers. Minutes early. Being late is never a good sign, and an employer, you be demonstrating your best behavior before you have the job. So if you're late to the interview, the employer might think, oh, we'll be late for the job. Firstly, you don't want to arrive too early for the interview. If you arrive 30 minutes in advance and you're announced by a receptionist or whoever's greeting you, it can at times be a slight irritant. It can provide anxiety to the recruiter or the person with whom you're interviewing. Finally, this might seem like a no-brainer, but don't forget to turn your cell phone off. And I do encourage you to turn it off rather than the vibrate position, because even that vibration can make noise and it can be distracting during the interview. We've arrived at the interview, and so we want to ensure that we're practicing good nonverbal communication skills, and this is really about demonstrating confidence. And so you want to stand straight. You want to make sure that you're making good eye contact and you're connecting with a good firm handshake. True what they say about first impressions, and so you only have one time to a good first impression. You want to make sure that you're listening and that you're not talking too much. When we're nervous in an interview situation, it can be easy to ramble, and you want to be careful talking yourself out of a job. You want to concisely respond to questions that you're asked. You don't familiar, and you have to remember that the interview is a professional meeting to talk about business. It's not about making a new friend, so your level of familiarity should echo, or mimic, I should say, that of the interviewer's demeanor. It's certainly important to bring energy and enthusiasm, but you don't want to overstep your place as a candidate looking for a job. Okay, asking questions. So this is very interesting because I would say that 90% of the time, my last questions to candidates is, what questions do you have for me? And the most common response is, I don't have any. You answered them all during the interview. And this is a fatal mistake for a number of reasons. It suggests that you didn't take time to think and prepare. But more importantly than that, you have to remember that when interviewing for a job, you're interviewing as much as they're interviewing you. You're talking about a life decision, your job, and often that would mean you want to understand every aspect of what that means, what you're going to be doing on a daily basis. And in addition to what you're doing, the culture and the work environment. You know, we spend a good third of our lives at work. I imagine that you should have lots of questions about what it means to work there. And during the Q&A, we can talk some more about some of those questions. Don't appear desperate. You want to act enthusiastic. Yes, you made a job, but when you interview with the please hire me approach, you appear desperate. You want to remember that the job market is increasingly improving, and in fact, in many, many industries, there's a shortage of skilled candidates to fill these jobs. So these employers want you. So just remember, you know, those 3 C's to remain cool, calm, and collected. Okay. talk about some of the common questions and perhaps some of the motivations behind these questions. Now, when an interviewer asks you for an example of when you did something, this is called behavioral interviewing, and this is based on the premise that your past performance is the best indicator of your future performance. And so when you're asked an example for specific behaviors, you want to do your best to relate a very specific example. Rehearsing the importance of preparation, and rehearsing is key here. I do suggest doing a mock interview with a friend or a family member to prepare and become more confident, or rehearse some of these questions in front of a mirror. Okay, so the common questions that you're likely to hear. Tell me about yourself. Now, actually, when I've asked this question, I've had some candidates start with their childhood. The interviewer is not looking for your life history, but they're looking for a short, organized statement of further education, really the work history and experience that makes you qualified for this job. In some ways, it is an icebreaker question, but it's also a little test of your communication skills and your ability to concisely organize your thoughts into a cohesive response. Question: why do you want to leave your current position? Also a question, this along with the next question, gaps in employment. These are frequently also found on job applications. And so I should stress, obviously, with all of these questions and your responses, you want to be honest, but you also want to remember that every piece of this process, of the recruitment process, is validating every other piece of the process. So the responses that you get here in the interview does with what your resume says. Does it align with what you wrote on your application? So you just want to remember that consistency is key, and if there's incongruence, that can raise eyebrows. It could cost you a job. When asked if you want to leave your current position, did you have a problem that might have been the impetus to leaving that job? Now, if there wasn't a problem, I left for a better opportunity. Although a recruiter, if someone said they left for a better opportunity, my follow-up question might be, what lacking your current employer? Why there another opportunity? Or perhaps they worked for a large organization, there wasn't an opportunity in another department. There will be probing. And so for an opportunity that's better suited to one's skills, that's certainly a reasonable answer. There shouldn't be any embarrassment about leaving due to layoffs. This happens due to a move, due to going back to school. Again, I would stress the importance of honest answers here. Gaps in employment and frequent job changes. And the way a hiring manager and a recruiter is going to evaluate your response to these answers is simple. Just pass the "is it reasonable" test. So assume you have a gap of employment, and the recruiter or hiring manager asks you about it, and they ask why. reasonable responses are, I took some time off of work to care for my ill parent. I took time off of work to go to school full time. I took off of work because I had a medical condition. These are all appropriate responses. Some I will hear, there'll be a gap 6 months, a year, and a response will be, I wasn't doing anything. And that's not a great response. One recommendation, if you do have a gap in employment for which you think it might not pass the is it reasonable test, try and get out there and do some volunteering with your field. You can put some relevant experience on your resume that will responding to that question, and also advance your skills while you're out of the workplace. The time when. So we already talked a little bit about behavioral interviewing. So the possibilities for this question are endless. Tell me about a time where you were asked to do something outside of your job responsibilities. Tell me about a time where you missed a deadline. Tell me a time when you disagreed with a coworker. Tell me a time when you suggested a better way to do something. These questions are telling because they're typically indicative of the things that will go on within that organization. If you ask those questions and prepare responses, and if we go back to those 4 to 5 scenarios, you should be able to be successful in responding to those. What do you consider to be your most significant accomplishment? And so with this question, the employer is looking to align the needs of their position with the skills and experiences that you have. And so assuming, for an example, that you're applying for a marketing director position, it's ideal if one of your was the design and implementation of a marketing strategy. And when responding to that, you want to speak to the details, and you want to speak to how it benefited the company. You want to speak to some of the challenges of that situation. You want to speak to anything quantifiable that may have impacted revenue. What do you feel is your greatest weakness? This is the question that everyone dreads. These days, it's more publicly positioned as what is your greatest area for development. And it's not as common of a question these days as more leaders tend to focus their philosophies on strength-based leadership. That being said, I still think it's worth a response prepared for this question. And similar to the previous question regarding significant accomplishment, there is looking for alignment. And so, for example, if one of your greatest weaknesses is deorientation, and the position requires a meticulous eye for editing or budgeting, there's not necessarily going to be an alignment there, and that might raise some eyebrows. Ideally, if you want to be honest about what that weakness is, but if you can demonstrate that you're working on it and you've even improved in that area, that's ideal. And a basic example of that might be in the past, my organizational skills got me into trouble when I missed some deadlines and I was frequently late for meetings. And, I started some time management training. I started using some apps on my phone and my calendar, and it hasn't been a problem. Where do you want to be 5 years from now? This is to ensure that your priorities are in alignment with the company's. In response to this question is that you would like to continue to progress in your career and assume responsibility. If you are interviewing for a developer position in Washington, D.C., and you say in 2 years I'd like to have a job in San Francisco, the employer might be hesitant to hire you. Why should we hire you? The employer is looking for a key differentiator. Why are you better for this position than anyone else? And as with all of these questions, if you can frame your responses with the context of the position, you've seen a description somewhere on the web, perhaps a recruiter sent you a job description, and so you want to instill a sense of confidence in the hiring manager that you can do this job. And so, discussing salary. Interestingly, this is a topic that makes people uncomfortable, and it's not the taboo. Discussing salary is not the taboo that it once was, and in this increasingly tight market, starting salaries are higher than they've been in many years, according to labor data. Now, that being said, you want to defer salary discussions as long as you possibly can. And the reason for that is, so you're on the phone and you're having a phone screen with a recruiter and ask you what salary you're interested in making, and you say $5,000 or $10,000 more than they were willing to pay. You get screened out right there. It's best to wait after you've interviewed, after you've been identified as a top candidate for the position. Your bargaining power is greater, and that $5,000 or $10,000 that perhaps they might not have considered spending ago when you were phone screened, well, they're dying to have you, and they're happy to pay that $5,000 or $10,000. And so I encourage you to postpone them as long as possible. Some responses that you can give, just if possible, can you tell me the range budgeted for this position? What would you typically pay someone with my background experience? If pressed for an answer, be vague. You can say, it's negotiable, but the salary I expect depends upon the job's exact specifications. Or you can generally prefer to hold off on salary negotiations until we're both confident that I'm a leading candidate for the position. Okay, so negotiating salary. I would say, and in 20 years that I've been doing recruiting has not changed. 9% of the time when I make a job offer, it is accepted with zero negotiation. I always find that so interesting, and I would say women are even less likely to negotiate for men. And while there are certainly many reasons for the wage gap between men and women, I think that is certainly one of the contributors to it. So I would offer negotiation is okay. And employers, they expect you to negotiate, and they're more then willing to negotiate. Now, intend to negotiate, starting point, and that requires some help on your part because you need to have an understanding of what the market will bear and what is an appropriate salary for your position. And so there are a number of different ways that you can find what should the salary be for this position. And to vary. It's going to vary depending on geographic location. It's going to vary depending on company size. It's going to vary depending on industry. Some of the places that I suggest you use, there are plenty of websites that provide this information. Salary.com is one. Glassdoor is another good one. Both Salary.com and Glassdoor, I believe, impose their salaries. Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's a government website. That's also another good place to look for salary data. It doesn't offer as rich of a repository as some of these other sources, but there are a lot of positions that you can find data. And many of our professions have professional associations. If you work within the human resources industry, the leading professional association there is SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management. Many of these trade associations will provide salary data free of charge. So I encourage you to take a look at that information. Oftentimes people work with agencies, either headhunters or staffing agencies to find jobs. The recruiter within those agencies will have a range. They're recruiting on behalf of the employer. They want to ensure that appropriations are being met, and so they'll share that information with you. I would use caution, though, because generally recruiters are more aligned, I would say, with the employer who is them a commission than they are with you. That is changing. I think that will continue to change as the market gets better, and we'll see more relationships growing and more loyalty between recruiters and candidates. We're not there quite yet. Job postings. Go to a lot of the job boards because plenty of employers will put the salary range within their job postings. So that's a way. And ask, if there's someone that you're friends with or that you have a relationship with that's doing the job that you're seeking. It's a sensitive question, and people can be sensitive about salary, but there's asking for purposes. So make it sound easy. All of this requires time and energy and research, but getting a handle on this is going to put you in a greater position to negotiate a salary. And again, I would echo, negotiate. Something else I would also like to address, there is a perception that employers, when they offer, that they will lowball a candidate, and they'd offer that back to 2008, where there were a multitude of candidates and not a lot of jobs that might have faced. These days, where there are so many jobs and not enough employees, employers know that if they can't make a compelling offer, the candidate is going to go elsewhere. So I would not make an assumption that you're being lowballed. I would give the benefit of the doubt and assume that they're coming from a place of good intention. And if you've done your homework, you'll know. Okay, sometimes there's just not the salary. You know, in the real world, there's these things called budgets, and some of us can't go over budget, and there are other concerns, you know, such as integrity or people that are currently working in the organization. But there is more than just salary to consider. You could always try and negotiate a bonus. So whatever salary they offer, you ask if you would be eligible for a performance bonus. Also, remember, there is more to compensation than simply salary. A signing bonus might be offered. This day and age, work-life balance is incredibly important to most of us, I would say, and perhaps even more important than money to many. And so extra time off is something that is often negotiated. And performance evaluation. You negotiate, and there isn't any latitude there, and so perhaps when you respond with your acceptance, you can offer, I would love to accept this. The salary was a tad lower than I anticipated. Would you consider evaluating my performance at 3 months, at 6 months, and reviewing my salary at that time? I've seen that strategy be very successful. Types of flexibility, and this can range from hours you work. A lot of companies have standard work hours. You know, everyone needs to be in the office from 8:30 to 5:30. Well, perhaps you prefer to work, you know, 8 to 4:30, or, you know, you don't want an hour lunch. There are lots of that flexibility. Perhaps working a day at home a week. There are all of these other aspects to compensation that you consider, and all of that is negotiable. And I would offer that the word an employer will say is no. It's likely not going to lose you an offer. And if it does, I urge you to think about, is that the type of employer that you would be comfortable working for? We've talked a lot about what you should do for an interview. We have several don'ts. I already talked about don't arrive late for the interview. Not a good way to make that first impression. Don't disparage your present or any former employer. Don't disparage the competition or other candidates. This is just a reflection on your character, and so I advise against it. Don't accept a job on the spot. We've already talked about the fact that this is a life decision, and like many life decisions, you want to give it some thought. You want to think about the job that you're going to be doing 8 hours a day. You want to think about the people with whom you're going to be working. You want to think about the environment in which you're going to be working, and perhaps you want to discuss that with your spouse or with your partner, with your family. I encourage asking the hiring manager if you can take a day or two to think about it. I've never said no to a candidate. Don't leave the interview without a clear idea of what will happen next in your candidacy. To ask the question, you know, what is the next step in this process? I'm very interested in this position. I feel that I'm a great candidate for this and this reason and this reason. Can you tell me what the next step is? Up with a thank you note. This this surprised me as well. I don't see thank you notes anymore. And I encourage you to send one because I do them rare. This is a way to set yourself apart from the pact. And an email in this day and age is completely fine. It doesn't need to be a handwritten thank you note, but just send an email. If you have perhaps an accomplishment or something that you failed to share in the interview that you think will reflect well on you and your candidacy for the position, I encourage you to slip that into the email as well. With that, we are ready for our Q&A.
All right, awesome, Lisa. Thank you so much. We have some questions here. Now would be the time, if you have any other questions for us, put it in the chat window or the Q&A window, and we'll make sure that we pick them up and get care of here. But one of the questions we had was from somebody who's a teacher, and she's trying to prepare for a job as a school administrator. She's having a lot of trouble getting interviews, and she wanted to know, how do you get that first interview without previous experience in that particular position?
And when someone is seeking a position for which they don't have experience, a great way is to get involved with professional associations. The networking can yield a number of things. First of all, contacts. And with those contacts, sometimes that may afford an opportunity to do some shadowing, or it might afford the opportunity to do some volunteer work. Admittedly, I'm not as familiar with school administration and what the professional association is associated with that. I wonder if there might be benefit in this case of seeing if she can speak with a school administrator in her area and get advice from someone working in the field.
Okay. The next one, I really like this one. How do you handle it if an interviewer is asking you inappropriate questions, like do you have any children, are you married, etc.?
And it's funny because those questions, they are very inappropriate, and I would deflect by saying, I'm able to meet the requirements of this position. Let me think about the wording for this. Provide a response quickly and deflect. So do you have children? I would say, I have children, they're well cared for, and they don't in any way impede my ability to do the job, to be at work on a daily basis, and meet the requirements of the position. Deflection is the best way. Quickly respond and deflect.
Next one, as a teacher, I've been asked what my weakness is, and I never be able to seem to come up with a good answer for that one.
Sure. So, about honesty in this process, and we have our weaknesses, and so I think this is where the preparation is necessary, and reflection on oneself as to what one's true weaknesses are, and then and it probably is more than one. And when you've figured out, what some of those weaknesses are, about what you're doing to improve upon them, and with the interviewer, choose the one that really, in a way, is impactful to a teaching position.
Was laid off after 26 years. Interviewers have asked why they stayed at that job for so long, like it was a deterrent. Any advice on how to handle that question?
Would chiefly on the accomplishments and the advancement that you saw in that position. Being with a company for 25 years, I have to imagine that you had a lot of accomplishments and that you did advance. I would speak to your loyalty to that employer, and I would speak to the benefits that the organization yielded from a tenured individual. But I would also not fail to relate how all of those experiences align with the job for which you're interviewing.
Okay. After applying to a position on a company's website and not hear anything, is it okay to try to follow up by phone call with the employer recruiter, or if you can find them, is it okay to call them on the company number or try to connect with them through social media like LinkedIn?
The primary area of contentment among candidates today, it's the endless black hole. I say if you haven't heard within 2 weeks, go ahead and try and reach out. I hate to say you likely won't have much success. You know, some positions are reviewing hundreds of resumes, and I'm not saying that that makes it okay for there not to be a response. Just philosophy is, if we're interested in you, you'll hear from us, and if you don't hear from us, you should assume we're not interested. I'm not saying it's right. It is absolutely okay to follow up with a phone call or an email. I would probably say email is going to be easier. I wouldn't follow up on LinkedIn. I'd see if you can get that email address, perhaps from a receptionist. Perhaps you can find it on their LinkedIn profile.
An interviewer is showing nonverbal gestures of disinterest in you during the interview.
Question. I would continue to focus on concisely and with appropriate and compelling examples to questions. Hear it, I think that's a display of unprofessional behavior, but I have no doubt that it happens. And let's continue along in the interview.
Okay. With gaps in my resume due to relocation because of my wife's career, what would be the appropriate response to that? So they have gaps in their, they have gaps in their employment, but it's due to his wife's relocation.
That's a reasonableness test. One way to address that is in a cover letter when the resume is being submitted.
Okay. What is the best way to answer questions about an incomplete degree or of degree when you have 30 plus years of relevant experience?
Question. This is another area I would answer the question honestly in terms of why why there wasn't matriculation or why the degree wasn't received, and I would focus on the experience alignment with the skills for the job. So your best to shift from this on lack of degree to the positive focus on I have all of these skills that match what you're looking for. Okay.
How do you answer this question? Tell me about a time when you disagreed with your supervisor, a situation that you experienced and how you handled it.
Sorry.
So, time when you disagreed with your supervisor about a situation and how you handled it. So it's a behavioral question. He's wanting to know how do you answer that type of a question.
Okay. So this is a situation that happens every single day in the workplace. And so I would like to think that this individual can be a example of what your disagreement was over, be it a strategy or a way to execute or what have you, and in addition to providing detail surrounding the situation, how specifically or she his manager. I think this through just a little bit more. I think that the way to do this is to focus on the diplomatic way in which the employee addressed their manager with the differences.
Okay, that's very fair. Let me see. How do you answer the question, have you ever been terminated or asked to resign a position? Specific does that answer need to be if the answer is yes?
Information that is verifiable through a background check and through reference checks. So the response is yes, you should answer that question honestly and provide enough detail so that the employer can get a true sense of what happened. Was it a performance issue? Was it a personality conflict? Was it a mismatch due to culture? If there were any lessons learned by the employee in this case, this is a good time to emphasize, I made a mistake here, here's what I learned, it hasn't happened again, and I anticipate it will happen again. Is the best policy.
Okay. Respond when the interviewer states that you're overqualified for the position and they're surprised that you would apply for the job.
This is a recent article, I think, in Harvard Business Review that spoke to the fact that research is not bearing out that overqualified candidates are leaving as soon as a better opportunity comes along. In this case, that the candidate was specifically interested them about this job, and why they would be a good fit. Again, this goes to the skill alignment.
Okay. I'm 55 years old, and I recently completed a Bachelor of Business Administration degree. What type of a resume would work best for me?
So, significant work experience that this candidate has? So, and I'm sorry, the question is what type of resume would be best?
What type of resume would be best?
Okay. So with a new graduate just coming out of school that have a lot of work experience, I always recommend that the education go top of the resume right after the summary of qualifications. In this situation, given that there is significant work experience, to focus on the work experience and the education toward the bottom of the resume. The employer is going to be focused on the skills and the experience gained from those work experiences more than the degree. In no way do we minimize that. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Congratulations.
One, does a UI experience have to be disclosed?
More and more. In fact, I expect that this will soon be federal legislation. It's locally called Ban the Box. Do need to be revealed until later on the interview process. Further, there are protections for employees that have these types of misdemeanor record, and what is the relatedness to the job? Now, if someone is applying for a commercial driver's license position, a truck driver, that's very relevant. If someone is applying for a marketing position, it's not relevant. So it's not something that you should be overly concerned about. And most are doing background checks, and when that is conducted, it likely will come up. It probably won't disqualify you for the position.
Right. This will probably be our last question, but I think I saved the best to last. I really like this one. When you asked candidates if they have any questions for you, what have been some of the more memorable or impactful questions that you can recall?
Questions are good questions to ask. But that can be impactful to your happiness on the job. And so, why is this position open? So, trying to understand why under circumstances and why the person left. Often the position is open. Decisions are made with the organization. Speak to the level of hierarchy or bureaucracy in the organization. Have success measured? Cultural questions. Do employees have input into product direction. In terms of position, a good question is, what does a typical day look like in this job? What's facing the company today? Even broader strokes, facing the industry today. Are top 3 goals that can, or that a person hired in a position should within the first 3 to 6 months on the job? That's the people leave managers and not jobs is very true. So good questions to ask are related to what is management style, do your employees
Okay. We thank everyone for joining the webinar. We will be sending this out tomorrow in a link. You'll be able to come back to our website and you'll be able to watch it. So, of course, if you have any questions for us, we have a customer service number on our website. You're always welcome to give us a call. We're fully staffed from 8:30 to 5:30 every day, and we are more than happy to help. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. It was very insightful and very helpful.